Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Sonitus Issue 1. This is part of a three-part limited series from Alterna Comics from 2018. We start out with a guy named Ben, traipsing through the swamps, and he comes across this house that he used to party at when he was a kid. It's this old, decrepit, rundown house that him and his friends used to go to, and he's kind of reminiscing as he walks through these dilapidated rooms that are still sort of furnished but with all this beat up stuff. He goes to the kitchen and finds a bunch of like old plates and old bottles. There's a cooler there that's got a bunch of bottles in it, and he's kind of having these reminiscings when suddenly he hears a slam. So he goes to check it out, says hello, nobody responds, figures it's kids, and then he sees these eyeballs and he's grabbing his head like he's hearing it too, but he sees these eyeballs on this creature and it's chasing him. It's this real weird abstract looking monster, very Lovecraftian, and he can't get the windows open, doors won't respond to him, but he grabs a knife and it fights with it, and he seems to stab it to death, and he looks at his hands after throwing the knife away, but there's nothing there, and he seems to be hallucinating. Well, he walks around a little more and has a flashback when he sees a sneaker. He has a flashback to a party that apparently happened here, and he got into it with one of his friends. There's no talking, so we have a very abstract sense of this flashback as well. And he kissed a girl, and obviously something happened, probably some sexy time. But he's trying to face his past, and he goes toward the second floor of the house, and that's where the issue ends. Now, obviously, there's a lot of visual metaphors here. The title of the issue is Floor 1 of 3, so he's going to go all the way up to the third floor by the third issue, and he's coming to terms with something bad that happened in the past, and this creature is probably a metaphor. He talks about having tinnitus, like the ringing in the ears, and it's something about that, and that's probably a reminder of something like a guilt kind of thing that's haunting him. I don't know, but it's pretty interesting. The art, I didn't hate it. It was interesting. It was by Cecilia Lovalvo. The story is by Cody Sosa and Dan Shepard. Colors by D. Kanifi. Edits by Nicole Airy. I have to say the story is very intriguing. The art style really does work for it. It's this real heavy line pencil work. It's very abstract, but it does work for it because everything is supposed to seem kind of abstract from what I'm gathering. And I'm real intrigued to see where it goes. It was a real quick read because there's actually not a lot of words in here. It's a very quiet book, and the visuals are really driving the narrative, and it's really making the most of the comic medium. So I really like that. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend this and say check it out because Alterna does some good stuff, and this really seems like it's going to be a really interesting book. Thought it was a really interesting story. Probably not for everyone. There's some horror elements, but I don't think it's actually a horror book. I think it's more psychological than that, more of a thriller. But there's this weird kind of abstract eyeball monster with like a Cthulhu type body, and it takes place all in this house in the middle of the swamp off the edge of town that should have been bulldozed and burned down a long time ago. But nope, I'd recommend checking it out. That's kind of where we're at with it. There's really not a lot to say about this issue, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. That'll do it for this one. As always, thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel, and be sure to hit like, share, and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. Today we are looking at Sonitus Issue 2. This is part of a 3-issue limited series from Alterna Comics. Came out in 2018. And we have a flashback here that we're starting off with. This is the second floor, or floor 2 of 3 specifically. Now we have a flashback of the kid walking through to the party at the abandoned house, and he runs into this girl Claire, and they decide to go upstairs and do some ecstasy together. And then they have the sex. Well, somebody's watching them while they're doing the nasty. Then we cut forward to the present day, where he talks about the last time he was up in the second floor was when he was with Claire, and he's walking around, and he sees the bathroom where his friend was puking, and another friend was helping him out. Well, he starts to see ghosts then, and what we had seen during the sex scene was a spider had crawled down amongst them, and I'm not sure what the symbolism there is for, but he starts seeing monsters again in the modern day. So he sees this image of a girl and she gets fangs and turns into a big spider monster and then chases him out of the room, and he sees this light and he's running for this door, and then he sees all these spider eggs, and it's really freaky weird. All these spiders start swarming down from above and start attacking him, and he's got to run through this hallway. He sees a ghostly silhouette, tries to follow it through this tunnel, and sees the attic door that leads, or the stairs that go up to the attic rather, and that's where the issue ends. Now I'm leaving out a little bit of the detail because this is a very difficult book to describe, because so much of it is not only a mixture of visual but also of the pacing and wording of his story. It's a very surreal story, but obviously something really tragic happened to this guy, because he's either hallucinating or actually seeing monsters, and I'm not sure which. But it looks like he's dealing with some kind of psychic trauma, not in the metaphysical sense, but in the mental sense, in the clinical sense, I should say. I think this is a really well done book. The strange, sketchy style of art really works well with it, and I kind of like it. I didn't think I was going to, honestly, but it's a pretty interesting book, and I'm going to go out on a limb and recommend yet another Alterna book, but they are doing really good work, and I do like this. This is story by Cody Sosa and Dan Shepard, art by Cecilia Lovalvo, colors by D. Kanifi, edits by Nicole Airy. I think everybody did a really good job. It's got an interesting color scheme that really works well. It's because you get like the night shots where they're partying are these blues and yellows. The yellow's for lighting, of course, and it really has an interesting tone. And it changes when you go to the modern period. It's a lot darker. The blues are replaced with blacks, and you've got these faint hints of yellow light that spill out on his face. And the spiders are these kind of purple-blue colors. It's really interesting, and I think they did a really dynamic use of color here. Even though it's printed on newsprint, eventually this will be reprinted into trade paperback, I'm sure. They seem to do that with most of their work, and I hope it is, because I'll probably buy it. I'd be willing to pay $10 for a perfect bound trade paperback of this. I'm looking forward to that. I recommend this book. It's only a $1.50 cover price. If you're listening to this in 2018, you shouldn't have too much trouble tracking down a copy or ordering it from the Alterna Etsy store. And I'd say it's better written than almost anything from Marvel. Go check it out. Give it a shot. For the cover price, you really can't go wrong. And if you can't find it at your local comic shop, ask them to order it. And if they can't or won't, go on Alterna's Etsy store and order it from them, because I think a lot of their stuff is really underrated. But that'll do it for me for this episode. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you want to help us out, be sure and hit like and subscribe. Patreon link is below as well, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Sonitus issue 3. This is the last issue of the 3-issue limited series from Alterna Comics. Story by Cody Sosa and Dan Shepard. Art by Cecilia Lovalvo. Colors by D. Kunifi. Edits by Nicole Airy. Now, you have to excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cold, so if I sound a little worse than usual, that's the reason. So this is floor 3 of 3. We start off with the younger version of the narrator walking through the forest with his friend. They're heading toward the house, and it jumps around a little bit, but effectively there was a tragedy involved in this scenario when they were going to the house. One kid didn't want to go, that's our narrator, and the other kid was calling him names, vulgarities, that sort of thing. Well, now our narrator is in the attic. He's seeing giant spiders around, having nightmarish visions, and he sees the ghost of his friend, and we learn what happened to the friend, and then he sees some more like nightmarish visions, some scenes of water, and then he kind of reconciles himself with it, and then he just leaves. That was the issue. I have no idea what the point of this book was. It didn't make a lot of sense. We didn't really get any closure on what happened with the guy that saw him and that girl doing it, and I don't know. This issue felt very rushed. The cover says the beginning and the end. Well, there was no end because it didn't make any sense. This would have worked well as like a short film where you could get more meta with it, because it's clearly designed to be more of a pseudo-intellectual piece where you're supposed to see a lot and read into a lot of the visuals, and I think that really loses something in this particular medium. I think that the story really needed an actual ending or something more akin to a solid story, because it really jumping all over the place across 3 issues. Maybe if you read it in graphic novel format, it would be better, but as individual issues, it's very confusing and doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Now, the pretentious people will tell you what they're interpreting is, but I don't think that there is actually that much of a story here, and I was really disappointed by that. Still, the art's pretty interesting, the story's got an interesting concept, it just executes poorly, and I think this really would have made a much better short film, one of those weird art house kind of things that's like a pseudo horror thing that's much more open to interpretation. I don't think comics were the right medium for this one. I really think this should have been a film. I think there's a lot of really unanswered questions. You know, what is going on? Is it mental health, or were there actual monsters? How much of it involves this other person and this supposed ghost? And what did the girl and him banging have to do with anything? There were a lot of unresolved loose ends in this that I think really needed to be addressed and needed tightening a little bit before this really was adapted as a comic book. As a screenplay, you could have that and have more appropriate visualization. I don't think it worked here. So I'm not going to recommend this because I just don't think it worked, but that's just my take on it. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you liked the video, hit the like button and consider subscribing so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.